Welcome. My name is Pieter Jan Clairweg de Zwaan. I'm the Dutch ambassador in Brussels. And we organized this wonderful webinar together with the Luxembourg embassy here in Brussels, but also with the participation of the Benelux and many other partners. We would have loved to organize this seminar earlier, and it was the plan to do it on the 12th of March. But Corona changed things. And that we can do it now together this way with more than 100 participants, policy people, academia, business, civil servants from the European Commission is more than fantastic. And I want to take you back quickly to the dark days of September 1944. Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg were not yet liberated from the Nazi yoke. But their leaders came together in London to decide upon a customs union. And that became, as many of you know, the trailblazer for future cooperation in Europe and the European Union. And dear friends, I do not want to compare the challenges today with the dark days of 1944. But the challenges we face in the Benelux are great. Climate change, the dilemmas of energy transition, sustainability, but also geopolitical competition from other parts of the world, and of course Brexit, which is taking place not far away from us. And here in the Benelux, in an operation area on the the delta of Meuse and the Scheldt River and Rhine, in an area which is probably one of the most densely populated in Europe, but in an area also which is probably one of the most innovative in the world, where we seem to be able to find solutions for spatial planning, an area which is also the export motor of Northwestern Europe, and an area where people are probably one of the most happy in the world, if you look at the Human Development Index, and where children are happy. And it's in this area that we have to face the challenges of climate change and transition. And that's where the circular economy and the challenges we face and building circular comes in. Both our three countries have set high ambitions when it comes to building a circular economy and building circular. The Dutch coalition agreement has, well, ambitious and I think realistic benchmarks, but so has the Flemish and the Wallonian and the Brussels Gewest, but also Luxembourg. And when you look at the Circularity Gap report, which was presented last year of the Alan Carter Institute, you see that all our three countries are doing a lot better than other European countries. So we have an example to show. And we are also shown, our three countries, that building circular is not only about values, but is also good business, and that we can use it as an export mechanism. Because a strong internal market for secondary raw materials is necessary to prevent scarcity and unstable supply and rising prices of raw materials, which we sometimes have to get from countries far away, and also countries we do not want to be too dependent upon. So I'm really looking forward to this seminar, to the conclusions, and I think let's set the ambition that. The Benelux was the trailblazer for the customs union and the European Union, and that today the Benelux is a trailblazer for building a sustainable economy and a circular economy. With that, I give the floor to Mr. Van Eyck of Holland Circular Hotspots. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your kind words of welcome and for your sense of urgency. Good morning, everybody. Warm greetings from the Netherlands. My name is Freek van Eyck. I'm Director of Holland Circular Hotspot and very, very happy to be here with you. Well, where are you? You are at the webinar, the Benelux Build Circular, which is organized by the Dutch Embassy in Brussels, the Luxembourg Embassy in Brussels, and the General Secretariat of the Benelux Union. What we will do is we'll exchange knowledge on post-COVID-19 policies, which are very much needed. We'll pinpoint where national policies and projects could benefit from collaboration, and how we can work together as a laboratory, a living lab for further European initiatives. Who are you? You are more than 100 participants, a very nice mixture of government, businesses, enterprises, NGOs, researchers, and advisors and lobbyists. Well, this webinar, as you know, is about policies, but we want to make it as practical and as business-oriented as possible. And so we're very pleased with the turn-up of businesses. And of course, a very, very warm welcome to the Ambassador of Luxembourg, Her Excellency, Ms. Arlette Consemius. And as we welcome you, Mrs. Ambassador, we want to say the special thanks on behalf of your embassy to the members of the Business Club Belgium-Luxembourg. Now, as a moderator, I always have some nasty tasks, which are the house rules. So before we throttle up the webinar, let me share briefly the rules of the webinar. Can we have the house rules on the screen, please? So first of all, there are the Chatham House rules. So you are free to use information from the discussion, but it's not allowed to reveal who made any comment. Please mute yourself during this webinar. And we want your input. Please use the chat box function you can find in Zoom. And as an ID, why don't you just fill in a question already right now, the reason why you entered this webinar, the question you had in mind, and refer to the speaker, which you want the question to answer. And yes, we will share all presentations up front. Now, what can you expect today? Can I have the program, please, on the screen? As you know, the EU has embraced a Green Deal and a Circular Economy Action Plan, and the building sector is so incredibly important for this. It's 50% of all extracted materials in the EU. It's 50% of total energy consumption in the whole life cycle. It's 1/3 of all waste, and it's more than 1/3 of all CO2 emissions in the EU. So if we cannot make it work for the built environment, we can forget about reaching our EU ambitions. So this is relevant. So in the next 90 minutes, we will go deeper on that. We will touch upon topics as recycled content requirements, boosting the market for secondary raw materials, material passports, energy performance, design, and how to bring everybody together. So as you can see in the program, we have 5 excellent contributions, 1 by video, 4 live contributions, each 8 minutes, and coming from the Commission, from Luxembourg, Belgium, and the Netherlands. And there will be ample room of debate. Now, in this webinar, we will focus on policies, and speakers will share key features of their policy and chances for collaboration. Can I have the next slide, please? Because we have to realize that scaling up will have to come from companies, because they show guts, they show initiative, they invest, they accelerate the transition to a circular economy. And in this slide, you can basically see that in the built environment, from the very beginning to the very end, there are ample opportunities to go circular, and it's happening today. We're talking about bio-based materials, design approaches, buildings as a service.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to be invited to this webinar on the topic Benelux Built Circular. The European Green Deal asks all economic sectors in the EU to contribute with innovative ideas and investments to the achievement of the EU's climate goals. One sector that can play a crucial role is the European building sector. Buildings are currently responsible for 36% of CO2 emissions in the EU and account for 40% of energy consumed. Also, between 30 and 40% of our waste originates from construction. So it is evident that setting high environmental standards for new buildings and supporting sustainable renovation of old buildings will be a key element to achieve the EU's climate goals. In its Green Deal, the EU has therefore called for a doubling of the renovation rate of buildings to 3%, a huge challenge indeed, but also a huge opportunity. The Commission announced to assess national renovation strategies, evaluate the possibility of including emissions of buildings in the European emission trading system, and to review the construction products regulation. Implementing circular economy also in the construction sector will play a key role when using fewer and sustainable materials, reusing materials, infrastructure and buildings as much as possible, and opting for high-quality recycling after demolition. Of course, the ambitious goals set by the European Commission will need sufficient financing. In the so-called recovery program, the Commission therefore announced massive support for so-called renovation financing facility. The Commission aims to reach investments of no less than 350 billion euros per year. Priority will go first to public sector buildings, especially hospitals and schools, as well as social housing. For private residential buildings, the facility will support the supply of green mortgages, aiming to mobilize 50 billion in investments. For the long-term run, the EU plans to include innovative financing schemes under the InvestEU program. As a Luxembourgish member of the European Parliament and member of the Environment Committee, the achievement of the Green Deal is a matter of heart. While Luxembourg is one of the smallest countries in the EU and the smallest member in the Benelux states, our per capita emissions are higher than in any other European member state. This is mainly in relation with the more than 200,000 daily commuters, but also due to our building infrastructure. While we are a pioneer in the setting of energy standards of new residential buildings much earlier than required by the EU directive, the progress in the renovation of old buildings is rather slow. The National Energy and Climate Plan recognizes that there are a lot of renovations in Luxembourg. However, they are not conducted in line with the new energy efficiency standards. Even existing funding measures such as the Prime House, like we call it in Luxembourg, have not led to the intended breakthrough results. At the same time, Luxembourg has a long track record of sustainable finance, from microfinance to green bonds. And in 2007, the world's first green bond, stemming from the EIB, was listed on the Luxembourg Stock Exchange. And in 2016, the Luxembourg Green Exchange LGX was founded. In the Global Green Finance Index, Luxembourg ranks on a remarkable fourth place. So how can our special Benelux cooperation help in achieving climate goals in the building sector? We have to make better use of our respective mutually beneficial strengths. While Luxembourg can offer and help develop green financing tools to generate the funding for the necessary investments, the Netherlands can share its expertise in reduction of primary raw material use and its efforts to establish real circular cities such as Amsterdam. With the Regional Plan for Circular Economy of Brussels and the Flanders Materials Programme, Belgium is also an active player in attempts to increase the life cycle of buildings and develop sustainable materials. We can furthermore benefit from the mutual recognition of standards for construction materials that have already been set and used in individual Benelux states. Let me give another concrete example from the Drinking Water Directive, where I have been the rapporteur for the European Parliament and where we reached an agreement with the Council in last December. Here, the positive list for new contact materials that will be established in the context of this revised Drinking Water Directive will allow member states to benefit from authorization standards that have been in use in other EU regions, notably in our case, Belgium and Luxembourg. Thereby, the Benelux members could take a leading example in developing healthy and sustainable construction materials, which nowadays are often imported from bigger neighboring member states. We also know that the Benelux is home to many experts on the topic of smart cities, which will be key for the challenges ahead. At a conference organized in 2018 by the Business Club Belgium-Luxembourg, I had the opportunity to meet some of them, Jacques Heijnen, the CEO, for example, of Tomorrow Lab, or Davor Meersman, the CEO of the Open and Agile Smart Cities Network. Those are, in my opinion, the key players we should definitely consult in our common efforts to make construction more sustainable and more circular in the future. If we manage to implement the circular economy approach in the building sector combined with the smart cities approach, we will kill several birds with one single stone. We do not only contribute to the achievement of our climate goals, but we also support innovative jobs and growth in a sector that will never run out of work. At the same time, we alleviate a huge burden from our European consumers, as we will fight the high energy bills and reduce energy poverty all over the EU. So it is worth the effort. Thank you very much for your attention.
Which is Ms. Josephine Lindblom. She's Policy Officer of DG Environment of the European Commission. She will give you a highlight. She will talk about life cycle performance of buildings, in particular, who live carbon during the full life cycle. The floor is yours, Ms. Lindblom.
Thank you very much. Please flag if something happens technically while I'm talking. So yes, Josefina Lindblom, working for the European Commission at DG Environment. I'm here to talk about levels today. Now, levels is a new Commission initiative. It's a framework of core indicators to use to assess and report on sustainability performance of buildings. We see it as a common language, which can be used by all kinds of stakeholders and building professionals in the value chain. Now, levels is looking at the full life cycle of a building. It focuses a lot of attention on circularity aspects. So it brings those kinds of concepts into a framework which we hope, and we're using, I should say, a limited number of indicators. That's been a challenge because we're trying to cover something really quite complex and quite difficult, let's face it, but we're trying to condense it and really look at the most important aspects. So to use a limited number of indicators to provide a kind of a simple entry point into something which can be quite daunting otherwise. I want to stress that levels is not a certification scheme. It is this common language, as I said, where it can support you in identifying the hotspots of your building project and to future-proof your buildings, in particular in relation to whole life carbon and health and resilience to climate change. Levels has been developed since 2015. It was an action in the first Circular Economy Action Plan, for those of you who remember that one back in 2015. We have been having a great collaboration between the Commission, stakeholders, member states, in developing this tool. And the last year and a half or so, we've had lots of testing as well. So about 100 projects throughout Europe have been testing these indicators. And now we are ready to launch. So next month in October, we foresee this launch. I want to stress indeed that it is a common language. It is not a certification scheme, but it is there to inspire and support stakeholders who wants to bring their buildings into the circular economy, let's say. We also see how some of the biggest and most important certification schemes in Europe are aligning themselves with levels. So they are taking up some of the indicators from levels to bring them into their own set of indicators to be aligned. We also see how many member states who are keen on including circularity and life cycle aspects into their own policy initiatives are looking for inspiration and support in levels. So that's very reassuring. We believe that levels can be something for policymakers, the decision makers in general, design teams for sure, but also developers, investors, and constructors. Levels is covering, as I said, limited number of indicators, and yet we are able to cover different kinds of areas. So both resource use, which then have a direct impact on environmental performance, but also on quality and value of the building. So that would be typically health and comfort, resilience to climate change, and value and risk. What is interesting also, I think, with levels is that it is the indicators have been conceived in such a way that you can use it at different stages of the life cycle. So you can use it at the concept stage in a qualitative way, so that the design team can discuss with the client what are the major objectives, what do we want to achieve. And then as you come to the design and construction stage, you can use the indicators in a more quantitative way. And then, of course, at handover, the real performance must be checked, and the reality of the building, how it functions, and then later on monitoring. The indicators have been, as I said, conceived so that you can use it at any of those stages or all, that you choose yourself as a user. Just to say something also about what's next for levels. Now, in a couple of weeks, we will be able to publish it. It will be there to use. It's of course an open tool, free to use. It's voluntary, but we will also then start, once we have this as a basis, we will start to use it as indeed a basis for different policy initiatives at the European level. So we can foresee, for example, in the sustainable finance work, which is coming up, the taxonomy on buildings there, which some of you I'm sure are aware of. We see how we can include whole life carbon there, which is one of my hobby horses and a big part of levels. We look at the both the European Green Deal call in Horizon 2020. So research projects, there's a call in autumn, which will have an important part on life cycle of buildings, but also for the coming framework, Horizon Europe, we are developing a new public-private partnership, which will look at buildings more broadly and where life cycle will also play a role, and levels will be an important part of that. Then we have green public procurement criteria at the European level, where we will now start to revise those criteria for buildings based indeed on the levels indicators. Lastly, I wanted to stress that next year we intend to start to develop together with you, hopefully, a roadmap up to 2050 to see how to reduce whole life carbon in the built environment, in the building sector, I should say. So how to reduce that down to 2050. We see that some of the most sort of front-running member states who are starting to include whole life carbon in their building regulations or other policies, it often starts with setting up a roadmap, so with aspirational targets. And we would like to do that together with member states at the European level as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Josefina Lindblom. Might you want to know more? There's an extremely informative website on internet. Maybe the organizers can send a link to the web chat. Remember to send in your burning questions to us. We can answer them later. We have a second speaker. The second speaker, policy pitcher and panelist is Ms. Paul Schosseler. He's Director of Sustainable Construction and Circular Economy at the Ministry of Energy and Spatial Planning in Luxembourg. We will talk about policy development, but also about the Benelux perspective. I'm having a look at the organizers. Can we start with the video, or is that not possible? Otherwise, we go directly to Paul.
Developments in Luxembourg with respect to circularity and in the construction sector. So the little film you have seen represents a major urban development project by the Housing Fund in the northern part of Luxembourg, in the town of Wils. Wils is a circular economy hotspot in Luxembourg, and the project will not only feature sustainable urban development as shown, but also circular economy principles for construction and buildings. But today, the area still looks like my background picture, and you perhaps recognize a chimney. So the project has been discussed for decades, but mainly because of high costs for remediation of soil contaminated by industrial activities. So it nicely illustrates the errors that we have made in the past when dealing with space and resources. But on the other hand, it highlights also the new way the Luxembourg government wants to embark on circular construction. So as an introduction, the reasons why we want to rethink the way we are building in Luxembourg are manifold. So first of all, the construction sector is an important one. It's very active, so with nearly 45,000 employees, which is about 10% of the national employment. So it's a double of the EU mean, more or less. And we have, of course, to provide a long-term perspective for the labor market. We have also important traditional construction material industries in Luxembourg, mainly steel, but also cement, glass, and the economic catchment area of this is several hundred kilometers, so clearly in the greater region. But, and it has been mentioned already, so the current way of building, of course, has many negative impacts also. In terms of construction waste, so about 90% of the waste produced in Luxembourg is construction and demolition waste. And although demolition is recycled up to 90%, but it's mainly landscaping and backfilling through downcycling. And the major part of this is also land that is extracted, soil that is extracted, and this of course is also difficult to handle on a small area as Luxembourg. There are other nuisances in terms of noise, dust, traffic jams due to lack of automation and also optimization in the construction sector. So the circular economy offers many possibilities for addressing these challenges. And so in my second part, I want to highlight the current policy developments in Luxembourg for tackling problems of resource management with circular economy principles, including, of course, the construction sector. So over the last 2 years, the Ministry for the Environment has elaborated a zero waste strategy that supports the transposition of the European directives of the circular economy package. It will be the new waste and resources law. The strategy adopts a holistic view on the value chain and links the waste hierarchy with the three main stages of the circular economy value hill that you most probably know. So we have 3 stages: creating value, we're going the hill uphill, we maintain the value, we stay as long as possible on the plateau, and when we go downhill, we try to recover the value if possible. This zero waste approach is currently extended towards a broader circular economy strategy involving not only the Ministry of the Environment, but also my ministry, the Ministry of the Economy, and also the Ministry of Finance. So this circular economy strategy clearly looks at the whole value chain, and it should be a toolbox for implementing circular economy in various sectors, including, of course, the construction sector. So 2 main features of the Luxembourg circular economy strategy are: we want to identify and connect levers for public actors, governments, ministries, administrations. And these pillars are first, regulatory framework. Second, it's a financial framework. And the third is knowledge management. So these are, to my respect, pillars where public stakeholders can intervene. And then the second important feature is coordination of these levers with different stakeholders over the whole value chain to activate implementation projects. So what does this mean in practice, for instance, for the construction sector? So taking the first pillar, the regulatory framework, in the new waste and resources law, so there is a reinforcement of the deconstruction inventory that is mandatory for buildings and quantities over threshold values, and selective deconstruction and separation of components is needed and asked for. So, but this is, of course, the downhill perspective of the waste management. So what about the uphill perspective, the new constructions, basically the waste of the future? So here it will be mandatory to have also an electric inventory for materials and also the localization of these materials in the building. So basically a material passport. And this passport, of course, has to be kept up to date over the whole use cycle of the building. And also procurement needs to be taken into account, so the circular economy principles at the design stage of the buildings. So for the second pillar, for instance, the financial framework, so we are currently working on subsidy schemes to review the subsidy scheme for sustainable construction in housing and especially near zero energy buildings with a focus on biosourced materials that will get extra bonus because, with biosourced materials, of course, we have capture of CO2 and storage, and we can promote local value chains as well as healthy materials and indoor air quality, which is an important aspect also of the circular economy. But also companies get additional funding by the Ministry of the Economy for developing products and services when they respect the circular economy principle. And this is, for instance, part of the relaunch program after the COVID crisis. For the third pillar, the educational framework, I can mention the high priority on vocational training for different professions in the construction sector, starting with architects, of course, the design phase, but also trying to promote new tools over the whole value chain, like digitalization, building information modeling, new materials, and so on. But this is not only theoretical, but there are already also current initiatives that take up these developments. And here I want to mention, for instance, a physical and digital platform for second-hand construction components and materials that is developed by Lux Innovation and also the research center LIST. But I will come back to it in my third part of the intervention, the Benelux perspective. Another important example, for instance, is circular procurement for modular shared deconstructible parking and innovation hub for the mobility innovation campus that is set up in Colmar in the center of Luxembourg. And here this parking is going to be built by a Luxembourg company. That concept was developed also in the framework of the innovation policy of the Ministry of the Economy. So now coming to the third part, so the Benelux perspective, the main topic of today, in fact, two aspects are important from my point of view. So first, Luxembourg is a small country, and the construction sector, of course, is too small to cover the whole value chain in Luxembourg itself. So I think the Benelux cooperation and the cooperation in general with neighboring countries is very important for the management of the physical stocks and flows. For instance, speaking about biosourced materials, wood in the construction sector, we heavily rely on Belgian producers. And here the COVID-19 crisis has clearly shown that we have to build resilient cross-border value chains in critical sectors if we want really to go ahead with this kind of materials. But the second aspect for Benelux collaboration, for me, it's very important. It touches on the knowledge exchange and management. So collaborations on policy implementation, where Benelux can serve as a testing ground for new developments, as already mentioned. And here also, I want to give two examples. So I've mentioned the physical and digital marketplace for second-hand construction materials developed in Luxembourg, but we are looking at it in close collaboration with Rotor, so a company based in Brussels that has experience here, has already developed tools, and where we see how we can set up collaboration. And these regional cross-border catchment areas are, of course, extremely important for economic viability of such platforms. And quality criteria standards need to be developed to keep components out of the waste stream and to facilitate storage, transport, and especially reuse across borders. A second example is a network energy sprung. So we are talking about new buildings, but retrofitting is an extremely important aspect. Renovation, energetic refurbishment to create also here net zero energy buildings on the existing stock. And here the standardization, here renovation to reduce costs and increase acceptance is important. This was initiated also in the Netherlands and extended through also Northwest Europe Indirect project. So projects that really look at the sharing of knowledge and the development of innovation in the different countries. And here Luxembourg is also involved with our innovation hub NeoBuild and the Housing Fund. So with these examples, I want to conclude. Thank you for your attention, and I will be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, Paul. You've pointed us lots of items. You've shown us a real project. That's of course the one we always like. You've shown us actually that we need the skill of the Benelux, that let's say we need to recognize our standards mutually to create also markets, maybe work with innovative marketplaces. You pointed at knowledge exchange, and especially you told us to look beyond waste management and also to act on renovation. I certainly have questions to you, but so must the audience. So please send them your questions to the chat box. So it's now my honor to introduce our third speaker, policy pitcher and panelist, Ms. Dennis Paul, and he's the head of Service Product Policy, the Ministry of Health, Food Chain Safety and Environment in Belgium, and he will speak about the revision of the Construction Products Regulation and integration of environmental aspects. Dennis promised that a detailed slide deck will be sent to the participants afterwards. Dennis, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everybody. Well, I have a lot of things to say today, but my main point will be the CPR review, the Construction Product Regulation review, and to see how it can contribute better to a sustainable and resource-efficient economy. For the context, we spoke a lot about the Circular Economy Action Plan, but I want to remind that this is, I see it as only as a part of a more global picture, which was the roadmap to a resource-efficient Europe. Because when we are speaking of circular economy, it's really something necessary, but it will not be sufficient to tackle our resource problematic. We have also a huge political context that we have to introduce in CPR revision. We have legislation like energy efficiency in building level, action plan for financing sustainable growth. We have also more specific legislation, eco-design, which can be also in conflict or in competition with the CPR, the Construction Product Regulation. We have also the Waste Framework Directive, the REACH regulation. We have also the environmental footprint now, which was developed and which can be also in competition with the two-day tools of the CPR. We have all the development of the CEN-TC 350, and then the product-related standard, including the EPD, the Environmental Product Declaration, and we have other legislation also that we have to integrate or to take into account when we are revising the CPR. And it shows that today we have for a same product with all those different legislation, we can have different conformity evaluation and demonstration for a same product, which is not optimal for the economic actors. And we need really a coherence between all those legislation and reporting and obligations for the economic actors. Also, yes, I forgot to say that today it's really the moment to update this discussion because, well, Commission has started several consultations for the CPR review, and we will have very interesting debate under the German presidency. We will have a debate on sustainability and circularity aspects in the construction sector. On the future of standardization, it can be a little apart, but it's really, I think, important also to have in this context, and also another debate about indoor emission and environmental and health protection. Today in the CPR, we have already elements to more sustainable products. We have the basic working requirement 3 on hygiene, health, and environment, and we have the 7 on sustainable use of natural resource. It's a new essential requirement. Here we are speaking about basic working requirement, and this last one, then on sustainable use of natural resources, ask to improve the reuse or the recyclability of construction works, materials, and also the parts after demolition, asking also the durability of construction works, which is not good defined today, and also to use of environmentally compatible raw and secondary materials in the construction works. The Commission led or is thinking, considering to eventually to regroup the different basic requirements related to environment and resource efficiency. Now we have also to have in mind that the CPR is only a part of the sustainable building, because the sustainability of the construction is really made at building level. But if we don't have sustainable or information on the material, on the products which are used, we will not. It will be impossible to have a good evaluation of the sustainability of the building. Then we have really to make the link between the building and the materials, the products, the construction products. Today, we have at Belgian level, we have an example of this link. You know that the building in Belgium, or you don't know, is managed by the regional authorities, whilst the products are managed by the federal authorities that I am representing. And we have today a database for the EPDs, for the environmental product declarations of construction products, which is linked with the tool of the region Totem, which will give which will permit calculation for the at building level for the sustainability of the building. Now, when we see in more detail, what will be, what is the sustainability, and what is the trend today at EU level, it's clearly the Green Deal and the EU Circular Economy Action Plan, where we said that construction building are using a lot of resource and also generating a lot of waste. And then we have to work on items like resource efficiency. Also, we have to increase the useful life of building, but we have also ensured the adaptability and the convertibility of materials and products. But we have also, we have to keep in mind that other priorities remain, like climate, chemicals, via REACH regulation, which is horizontal legislation. But also we have to prepare us for the tomorrow challenge. And tomorrow challenge will be probably resource scarcity, which today it's really, it's an element which is not really taken into account in the policy. And another big challenge, which is really difficult to tackle, is biodiversity, because the modeling of biodiversity, it's a really difficult point. Now, if we come back at a product level and what do we need at European level, we need, which harmonization do we need? We need certainly an harmonization of the evaluation methods of the products. Today it's more or less the case. Now, do we have European thresholds for certain components or emissions? Do we need those at European or national level? For the chemicals, it will be done via REACH, then it will be at the European level. But for other aspects, the question remains open. And do we have to go to performance classes? This is a very big issue where the discussion are really hot on the table of the CPR revision. But for the classes also, we have to keep in mind that it could be really pertinent for some products. Then classes is like the energy label. But for other products, it has no sense. Then we must be also prudent in this type of approach. Now, another question also that, I exposed the time. It's perhaps, yes, I will perhaps switch a little of my presentation and to go to the last point that I wanted to introduce is the need to have a product sustainable passport. And it can be in the CPR or beyond the CPR. We have, then the idea of passports is to gather all the sustainability information and to make it available for the different actors who will need it, but also when they need it. And if we are thinking to a building, the very big challenge is the conservation of the information, because, okay, you're an architect, you have a good access to the existing data of the today's products, but when you will renovate a building, or when you will demolish a building, for having a selective demolition, or we need a lot of information, and to keep this information available. Then we think that this one is a next step that we need to go to have a good system about which will cover all the value chain, and also then to gather and make this information available for those who need it. Today, I want to point out that we have very interesting exchanges with Luxembourg. Luxembourg has developed an interesting tool. It's like a prototype, but we think that this is really the good way, and I invite also to follow the discussion and the exchanges on this very valuable tool. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Very much appreciated. You have shared with us the nitty-gritty details of the construction product regulation, and we have to look at safe materials, but that have to be seen in the context of larger buildings. You've mentioned just a few of challenges. I just quote a few. Let's say there's, of course, the alignment between waste, the world of waste, and the world of chemicals. We have to align a national, regional, and European context. For instance, harmonization of evaluation methods is one. So during the panel, probably we will zoom deeper on that. What can we do as help on harmonization and the Benelux contents? And you have also pointed out new challenges like how to deal with biodiversity. Very interesting, thank you. So put your question in the box, please. And then it's my honor to introduce the fourth and final speaker, policy pitcher and panelist, Ms. Marie van Dreumel. He's program manager, circular economy, the Ministry for Infrastructure and Water Management in the Netherlands. And he will talk about the circular economy strategy of the Netherlands and building and construction particularly. Marie, the floor is yours.
Good morning to everybody, and how much did I wanted to be present at in March to see all of you in person, and I find out now again how good it is to have conversations with our partners in Belgium and Luxembourg, because I think we share a lot of problems, ideas, and situations that we can have that we can benefit all from. I heard also the construction sector as one with a lot of issues that are dealt with. I hear my Belgian colleague talking about the CPR, which is regulation. I hear my Luxembourg colleague talk about spatial development and areas that have to be developed. And let's not forget also that the construction sector is an economic sector with a lot of people working in it. A lot of people have to make a living in it, from it, and it's not just about technique. It's also about how you deal with materials, how you deal with skills. It's about research. It's about education. So the construction sector is a big sector. It's an important sector. And let's talk about that from a circular point of view. Well, there's a lot of things. That's a difficult point to start with. In the Netherlands, we try to. I have a presentation, and I don't know if it can be presented now. Okay, let's go to the last slide at once to make things easier for you. Thank you. And then we go back to the other ones. In the last slide, at the bottom, you will find a web site, and I will my presentation will be alongside what is presented there. In the Netherlands, we have, and now we can go back to the second slide, please. Okay, thank you. This is the history of circular economy in the Netherlands. We started off 6 years ago, by the circular economy program, which I was one of the two authors from. And we have this cabinet target to be 100% circular in 2050 and to be halfway in 2030. And we divided it in 5 transition agendas, and one of them, the fourth one, is the construction sector. And for us, now to the next slide, please. for us, the construction sector is not just about buildings, not just about homes and the built environment, but infrastructure is connected to it. Partially because, as my Luxembourg colleague already mentioned, the waste and demolition or the construction and demolition waste is used in infrastructure, so you have to have some kind of connection with that. And on the other hand, the construction sector is a sector which is, or the infrastructure sector is a little more controlled. There are lesser players in there, so it's easier to have innovations there. And usually, innovations that start off or that enter into the building sector start off in the infrastructure sector. So you have to look at them in a comprehensive way. And now to the next slide, please. And to the next slide, please. Yes. And my big point is that infrastructure is very important for the construction sector as a whole. And well, you can look at it at your own leisure. But what have we done in the Netherlands? We started off with, as I said, the transition agendas. And we made it with a team of front runners in the construction sector, from architects to contractors to consultants to, at the end, the ones who give out the order to the developers for a project. So we joined them all, and we came up with a transition agenda, which has a metaphor that if you want to be circular in 2050, it's like climbing a mountain, and it's not really climbing a mountain in a straight way, but you do it with levels, and you do it with all kinds of roads that you didn't come across with. But if you want to get to the top, you have to have a moment where you can say to yourself, well, this is a base camp. This is where we start from. And that base camp we have defined as being completed in 2023. And we are now in the process with all those stakeholders, with all those issues that are dealt with in the construction sector. We are at this moment filling that base camp. What do you need to know? What do you need to have in place to be on to make a move to the 2030 target and the 2050 target? One of the issues that you have to deal with is, for instance, if you want to have a materials passport in 2030, or you want to have you want to know what you can do with it, you have to think about what is going to what is included in it and why you want to have it at this moment. So right now, and I'm going to the last sheet. Right now, we are dealing we are discussing with all kinds of parties and in a platform, and that's called CB23, as you can see. And CB is Dutch for circular construction, and the 23 is obvious. That's our base camp. And you can go to their website as well. I've forgotten to mention it. But in that platform, we have joined private, public partners together. So to discuss the most fundamental issues in construction. So you have to have standards, and my colleague from Belgium and from the European Commission already mentioned that. You have to have practices. If I order circular concrete, the contractor has to know what I mean by it. So you have to have a common language, and that common language that is developed in that platform CB23 together with public and private partners. And those are all elements that come into that base camp. The basic questions is how do you contract a circular designed viaduct, which we have just developed? In what way do you have to express your wishes as a consumer or as a developer to for private parties to understand what you mean? Now, that kind of language that's developed in CB23, and that makes up a pretty much what we use or what we call as the base camp. But you have to have more than that. You have to have innovations. You have to have well, as I said, the common language. But also you have to think about what can I leave to market parties? What can I leave to private sector? And what do I have to include in legislation? What can they not do that requires legislation? For instance, what has to be part of the CPR, or what has to be part of your own buildings legislation? That are also questions you have to answer. And of course, we can think of it, but how can we get all those parties involved with us? How can we? What do we need to do about awareness? What if I can build a completely circular house? Where can I find the consumers that want to live in it? What do they need to know if they have circular demands for their own homes? So all those questions that are put out in a transition agenda, that are also put out in our working program, and each year we refresh it, we actualize it to come up with new actions that have to be taken aboard. Well, right now I think the last slide is at place. There's not much more that I need to know. I need to tell you, which you can't ask or figure out by yourself. As I said, some things are worked out in CB23. Some things are instrumentized by green deals, by collaborations with market parties, and you should definitely look at our website for further information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mari. It was wonderful to hear about the Dutch moonshot to be fully circular in 2050 and what it means for building an infrastructure, and how you're basically setting a base camp, bringing public and private actors together. And it's nice that you also mentioned items like design, public tenders, and green deals, so new instruments in addition to, let's say, the policy framework. Now, the Dutch tend to be pretty blunt among themselves, as you know, Mari. See that as an invitation to put the fire on Mr. Van Dreumel in the chat side. So ask him nice questions. So far, I've one question from the organizers. Is it possible to play the video of Mr. Hansen? No, it's not, I see. So we go immediately to the, let's say, the question round. While you are thinking of your last key questions, I will warm up the speakers a little bit. And I begin with a very general question, because if I listen to what have been mentioned as possible collaborations and possible way forwards, we have heard public procurement, building environment part of an EU emission trading scheme, the polluter pays principle by extended producer responsibility, design aspects, material passports, harmonization of methodology, fixed percentage of recyclate in building materials, collaboration, certification. Now, the question to the speakers is basically, can we narrow the field down a little bit? Where can we collaborate in the Benelux? So I want from you a do and a don't, because we know it's very is connected. So what is your favorite collaborative next step in Benelux context? And at the other time, the don't, is there one topic which you say that is too complex, it's not the right moment, we should stay away from that at this moment? So a do and a don't. I want to start with Josefina.
thank you. I think that now I'm of course aware of that in this part of Europe now we are talking with countries which are to a large extent front runners in this area. So I think I would like to really stress the importance of including whole life carbon in your different policy initiatives. So making use of circularity principles and reduce the whole life carbon. So that would also include the embodied carbon in your projects. I know, of course, that you are working in this direction, but I think it's important to include this also in, for example, in the different recovery policies that you will put in place. The Commission will certainly try to work in this direction as well. So when it comes to how to bounce back from the corona crisis and the recovery funding and so on, when it comes to funding, when it comes to skills development, when it comes to data generation, and the importance of public buildings in this regard, please start to include also whole life carbon, because that could really set something in motion, I think. I also would like to ask you to, when it comes to the public authorities, to think about how you can impact at the European Council and other member states in Europe to drive this agenda forward, because you have a strong you can have a strong voice there, I think, because you have experience in that area. So push the others with you in that area. When it comes to don't, maybe I'm cheating a bit, but I'm turning the question around a bit. Don't think that it is not relevant to look at renovation. So I don't know if that is allowed to turn it around like that, but I think some people who are not so on top of these areas, they think that, yeah, circularity, that's a nice thing to have for new build, but for renovation it doesn't really matter. But we know that it's not the case. So just, I could give you some different kinds of examples there. I'm not going to spend time on that now, but if you want to contact me afterwards, I'm happy to share some information on this. The Commission will very soon launch the Renovation Wave. It is a communication to be adopted next month. And there we will also talk about circularity, life cycle, and actually also what levels this tool that I mentioned, what it can do to support this agenda also in renovation.
Thank you, Josefina. I think it's very relevant to mention renovation, because we need to scale up, we need to have impact, and we can't focus only on new buildings. The same question, let's go to Paul.
Yes, hello again. Yes, for the do. So I think what I've mentioned already in my presentation is that especially for Luxembourg, it's important that we really have secondary material markets for not only materials, but also components that function. And as a small country, so we really have to make sure that we get all these materials and components out of the waste stream, so that we have really standards and right definitions of what the quality is and how we can maintain the quality. And thank you, Dennis, for mentioning the product circularity data sheet. I think this is an instrument that really will allow us in the future to be sure about what do we have in our material, in our component, and especially also how can we get out again the value that is in there. Now for the don't, that's also tricky, but maybe I make a link with the first part. So especially the PCDS, for instance, we cannot be too strict, I think, on some aspects as where the time frame for construction is really challenging. So we are speaking today about materials that will eventually be reused or components in 40, 50 years. So I think we really have to make sure that we can reuse them, but we perhaps today do not have all the possibilities or technical means to reuse them. So I think we have to be really look at the whole use cycle in an intelligent way, and not to eventually limit us with certain aspects.
So keep it also pragmatic in a way.
Yes.
Then over to Dennis. Dennis, what's the lowest hanging fruit, and what's maybe a bridge too far at this moment? Please unmute yourself.
Sorry. Okay, I am here. Then I have a really practical demand here. You know, I mentioned that Belgium today has developed an EPD program. And well, those EPD projects are also running in the Netherlands, but it's not really the same in the same way. And well, it's a little a pity, but well, it's like this. But today we need a verificator of our EPDs. Then it's also a call to the Netherlands, to Luxembourg, to say, okay, today in Belgium we need people who will check the quality of the EPD that we are stocking in our database. Another point of collaboration I see, but I don't think that we will have something at Benelux level because, or on something mandatory, voluntary probably, is the development of a product passport. And today Luxembourg has a view on circularity, and we want to go a step further. And I think that we will have in the future really interesting exchanges on what we can do to improve the global sustainability of the products and the good use of the products, the good preparation, and so on, the good reuse of the products. And I think that here the Benelux can perhaps to be a front runner in this thematic. Well, I think it's the two main points. Also, a point also, we spoke about renovation, but today we are also challenging a big issue with the reuse of components of construction products, because in the CPR they have to be the CE marking, and CE marking, if we are speaking about CE marking, we need to test the products and to test product of recuperation. It's something is very challenging issue. We have to test it. Why? Mainly for security reasons, and perhaps for some products it's not a critical point, the security aspect. Then we have also to think a way to increase, to give more security on those products, more legal security, I mean. And like this, to have perhaps a specific system or specific rules to permit a better circulation and reuse of those products.
So in a way, you say you don't really have a big don't, but you warn of the complexity of the circular economy marking and the testing. If you thought that the waste management was difficult, wait till you're in contact with REACH or chemicals, for instance. It's also very challenging. Mari, the last in this line, a do and a don't from you, from the Dutch perspective.
I have 3 do's and 1 big don't. 3 do's: share experiences back and forth, support positions also in the European Union, and help each other find out how things are done, how far you are in developments, and what you can learn from each other. I think that's the main focus why we are still front runners in Europe, because we talk to each other, we learn from each other, we have this common background, and we should benefit from it every day again. 1 big don't, and in the light of my European Commission colleague, don't think of circular economy as an isolated problem, as an issue you can deal with within the boundaries of your own country. Especially if you look at it from a climate change point of view. Supply chains in construction are cross-border, and the CO2 that is gained, or the CO2 reduction that is gained in one country has its roots in another country. So how can we deal with that cross-border issue? And that's a hobby horse of mine. And how can we convince our European colleagues to share our views on that, and to solve this problem? Because from a circular point of view, there are lots of benefits to CO2 reduction. But if we cannot cross that border physically and conceptually, we cannot cash on it on a climate change level. So that's my big don't.
Okay, thanks for that, Mari. Much appreciated. Let's turn to a couple of questions from the audience. One quiz is a very familiar one. That's about prices. Basically, virgin materials are too cheap. How can we work on pricing, for instance, for new building materials? And see this broader or go specific? Is there somebody who wants to answer this question first? The pricing aspect. So do we have to work on the carrot and the stick? Do we want to go with, let's say, the bills on the stick for things we do not desire? Do we want to think of producer responsibility? Do we want to think of linking it to the ETS? Paul, do you have any ideas here? How can we work on pricing?
Pricing is a difficult topic because well, it's very relevant for Luxembourg because construction in Luxembourg is expensive, also well, linked to the prices of the ground. So every innovation you want to introduce, there's always a discussion about this will make construction even more expensive and yeah, less affordable for people. Well, the answer is a little bit theoretical, but I think it's the cost of the whole use cycle. So we really have to perhaps change our perspective of prices of materials and also of cost of construction and buildings by adopting a view on the whole use cycle cost of a building. So everything we invest in insulation materials upfront will help us ideally save money and also CO2 emissions later on. This asks indeed for reviewing a number of principles in business management, also in financial management. But there perhaps I can also give a small example. So in Luxembourg, we have now with the Ministry of Economy and Ministry of Finance, they have launched a tender for investing in more circular business models. So how can the finance industry, but also the whole insurance industry and so on, provide services that support this whole life cycle or use cycle view instead of only focusing on a limited part of the value chain?
Thank you, Paul. Much appreciated for this tricky answer, which often pops up. Then there has been a question on: will there be a harmonized standard on CO2 neutrality? Josefina or Dennis, are you willing to give it a go here? Dennis?
Yeah, I'm happy to give it a go, if that's all right.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Well, as I said earlier in my presentation, the levels framework, which includes about 14 or so indicators, which are trying to encompass all the hotspots in a building's life cycle, also has an indicator on whole life carbon. Because we think it is an extremely important indicator to look at. We know that if we are not taking that into account, if we are only, I should say, looking at energy efficiency, we are sub-optimizing the full system, and we need to go broader. The embodied carbon in a building project is very often very big. And we also have seen, for example, in recent studies in the last year from UNEP, from the International Resource Panel, from the European Environment Agency, where they are able to quantify more or less how big this part is of our total energy use. And what is the potential to reduce that as well, which is shown to be very large. It is very relevant. So we can't afford it not to take it into account. And we will then, as I said in the Commission, we will be working we set up a collaboration with other stakeholders, including member states, to see how can we set out an aspirational roadmap to drive down, to reduce whole life carbon up to 2050. And with that in mind, we will then start to inject that kind of thinking in different policy initiatives, right? We already now, even before having started this roadmap exercise, we are starting to include it in policies such as the the sustainable finance, green public procurement, etc. But we are also, at least personally, I'm not talking for the full Commission, but from DG Environment side, we are certainly hoping to be able to include this in whether it is the energy efficiency directive or the energy performance of buildings directive. Now that's not a promise, because I know many different parts of stakeholders needs to come together. That includes the Commission, but I do think that is the way we need to drive this agenda. And of course, member states can push us in this.
And I'm sure the Benelux will try that. Maybe a question for Dennis, and maybe if you have a 1-minute answer as well on certification of products, because that's not the same in lots of countries. How do we create an internal market? Can you please react, please?
How can we create an internal market? Well, having a common language and to know what we have to test, and to have common test, and also a common expression of the results of the test. This is the basic requirement that we need. After that, well, we have today a system of notified bodies, which is already a European system, because if I receive a report from an Austrian or a Dutch notified body, for me, it's like a Belgian one, has the same quality. Then I don't really understand the question, but also to come back to the former question, I want to point out the risk to have a mono-criteria approach. I participated in the PEF, in the Product Environmental Footprint pilot phase, and it was really clear that we don't have to communicate or to put our attention only on one environmental impact, but to consider more consideration in the full life cycle. And it's really, in my view, it's dangerous to be concentrated only on CO2, because we can generate side effects. Then I don't have other. Please, Josefina, you wanted to complement my answer, I think.
Josephine, if you can make it very short, because I want to have one final question also.
Yes, if I may, just to say that, of course, in the development of the construction product regulation and the basic working requirement number 7, which you mentioned, they are looking at what levels now is sort of including on the building level. What are the indicators for the building level, which concern material and resource efficient material flows, etc. And then they see, and what would then be the information needed on the product level to feed into that, and that is then something which is being sort of developed within the CPR revision as well. So there is a link. I just want to make that clear.
Thank you very much, Mari. A final question before we are slowly going to the wrap up. There was a question: how can we make circular economy top of mind? So this is maybe more not a direct policy regulation, but how can we make sure that it gets enough attention, because it has so many benefits in terms of jobs, environment, economy. You see now that hydrogen is a big thing. We're talking about the European Green Deal. How can we make sure that circular economy gets the attention it deserves? And the Dutch seem always to be very outspoken on circular economy. So what can we learn from you, Mari?
Thank you, Freek. Well, to me, the glass is always half full instead of half empty. And why should we keep it on top of our mind? That's just because what you said, the benefits that come out of it. If I listen to Josefina, she said, well, you have to think about the materials, but also you have to think about how materials, how products are put into a building. If it's detachable, then you can easily reuse it. If you have to do all kinds of things with it to get it out of a building, then it's useless. So you have to think about all those elements in a building, in construction, in infrastructure, to be able to assess or to be able to be more circular. So it's a very challenging but also very inspiring topic to deal with, because you can have benefits on CO2, you can have benefits on nitrogen, as you said, and it creates new skills, it creates new knowledge, So that are all topics that come in my mind when you talk about, if you ask me, why should circular economy be on top of our minds? And to give me just one last remark, yesterday I met Josefina already, because we discussed all kinds of topics that we discuss right now together with the Commission yesterday, because there was a Green Deal. So there's a lot of there's a lot of momentum in Brussels now as well to pick up, to cash in all the benefits from the circular economy. So we discussed the circular economy action plan with the Commission, and how do we think about it in the Netherlands, and what the Commission already can tell us. And we made a big case again. I keep mentioning it, a big case that you have to include the infrastructure sector as well if you talk about construction. So it's big, it's a big challenge, a huge challenge, but you can have a great societal effect, both economic, both environmental. So that's another reason why you should keep the circular economy on top of your mind, especially in the building sector.
Much appreciated, Mari. Now, unfortunately, we are approaching the last minutes of our webinar. So on my side, I have the difficult task to wrap up, but not after first thanking all the speakers for their insights and the audience for their attention. Unfortunately, we missed the video of Mr. Hansen, but he said many sensible things. One of the things I picked up from the video, which I saw before, that he stressed also the need for sustainable renovation. He stressed also the need for recognition of each other's standards. And he pointed out using each other's strengths, like use the strength of Luxembourg in green finance, the circular city approaches and privacy resource reduction attempts of the Netherlands. He pointed at the material programs and regional plans in Belgium. Then we have seen Josefina. Thank you, Josefina. You brought us to a new level, if I may say so, focusing on, let's say, life cycle performance of buildings, also important for renovation. Paul, you mentioned us that Luxembourg is too small to cover the whole value chain, that we need to work actually in the Benelux context. You also mentioned the importance of looking beyond waste management, the need for collaboration and knowledge management. Dennis, you touched upon the construction products regulation and integration of environmental aspects. And that opens a whole new debate and lots of work still on, let's say, the level of not only products, but also buildings. And it opens the debates on product and material passport and environmental product declarations. Finally, Mari, you mentioned additional aspects like circular design, public tenders, public procurement, green deals to stimulate circular use of materials. And I think for you, it might be nice to know that as next steps, we will share the conclusions of this webinar with the Director Generals of the Benelux member states, and we will hope and we will know for sure that they will pick up the challenge and make the Benelux a testing ground for the EU in this field. I want to thank you from my part, and I'll gladly give the floor now to Mr. Rudy Huigelen, Deputy Secretary for the closing words of the seminar. Thank you.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. In one sentence, yes, my name is Rudy Huigelen. I was, until 10 months ago, I was the Belgian ambassador to the UK in an interesting period. I don't need to mention why. But very happy to work here at the Benelux, a union formalized in 1958, and the Dutch ambassador to Belgium very eloquently gave a summary of what this organization is about, and so I won't repeat all his words. I just want to apologize for a few technical problems that occurred, but you have to know we have a very able and very hard-working staff here, but it's a small organization and we do what we can. Let me just say that many of the speakers said that the three of our countries are in fact front runners in the circular economy, and also in this specific aspect of the building and construction business. Many of the speakers also must say were very Benelux minded, in the sense that you are open for further cooperation. We are very happy, and we are always willing and able to help the private sector, the citizens of the Benelux, and to make our economies greener, and to take the conversion that we have to make as an opportunity and not as a liability. And I see that we are all on the same page there, and so very happy to hear that. The Benelux Union provides a platform for this cooperation, and the contributions and the conclusion of this webinar, as well as your questions, will be shared with the Benelux Working Group on Circular Economy. And I personally look forward to discussing with them and with the Director Generals of the Benelux member states in our upcoming steering committee. To conclude, I would like to thank the Dutch and Luxembourg embassies for organizing this interesting webinar, together with the General Secretariat of the Benelux Union. And I would like to thank the Ambassador, Mr. Kleiweg de Zwaan, our moderator, Freek, although sometimes you were lost, we couldn't hear you, and once again, apologies for that. Our esteemed speakers for their valued contributions. And I would also like to thank the Luxembourg government for providing this publicity spot on a specific project that we showed during the webinar. So I think we can conclude. Thanks also for all the very interesting contributions from DG Environment, from the Commission, and personally I learned a lot, and I think we can conclude this webinar. Thank you.